Hello everyone, in this video I would like to talk about different types of sprites that RefreshUI has. There are two groups of sprites that use materials directly and sprites that use atlases. Let's start with ones that use materials directly. There are two sprites in this group. The first is the basic one, UISprite material. It creates a quote with material and does not have more features upon standard set of properties for all UI elements. We could check it here. Size, pivot, sorting, color and material. The second one has ability to define UV coordinates to use only a portion of the sprite. Let me select it. Here you could see texture rect. Normally these types of sprites are used for downloadable content, for example full-size portraits of the characters and similar things that does not make sense to put in atlases. Also, it could be used when you want to apply a very specific shader and don't want to mess with atlases. The second group contains sprites that use atlases. In order to use atlases, it is required to assign two properties: reference to atlas and reference to texture that should be used by this sprite. For example, let's check UISprite here. It has reference to atlas and it has a reference to texture. In this case, it's a pink texture. In this group of atlasable sprites, there are a few very specific ones. I'm going to start with the most basic one, and it is UISprite. It only creates a quad that uses texture provided. Again, no additional features here, you only have atlas and a texture. Next is the sprite rect that is similar to material rect. So you could define what portion of the texture should be used by the sprite. So here you could see that sprite rect has texture rect property. Next sprite is UISprite 9. It is here. Some call it 9 patch sprite or 9 slice sprite or simply slice sprite. I like to have 9 in the name, so I call it sprite 9 or 9 sprite. Again, this is the most basic sprite and does not have a lot of properties. It slices texture provided in the center and stretches the pixels between the pieces. So here you could see what is the original texture that is used by the UISprite 9. And this original texture actually goes to the atlas. So definitely you could save a lot of space in the atlas by using UISprite 9. Often it is required to create a frame, and Sprite 9 seems to be a perfect match for this task. But in this case there will be a significant overdraw caused by the transparent area inside the frame, here. To avoid overdraw, there is a special sprite that I call Sprite 9 frame that does not render center part. Let me demonstrate it by assigning solid sprite to Sprite 9 frame. So here is the Sprite 9 frame selected. Now we assign solid sprite and you see that center part is not rendered. Okay, let me return it back to our frame sprite and continue. And the final sprite type. Remember that basic Sprite 9 slices texture in the center. For some sprites it is better to define custom slices, and this is why Sprite 9 custom exists. It is here. It allows to define custom slices. As you could see, Sprite 9 custom uses the same texture as UISprite material here. But it looks different. Why it looks different? Because UISprite 9 custom has custom slices that slice this texture right here, vertical left side, right side here, top part here, and the bottom here. So that's why you see center quad stretched like this here, and the green quad not modified at all. Custom slices look like this. So you basically define the relative portion of the sprite from left side, right side, top side and bottom side. Now let's talk about atlases and why I do not use built-in atlases. The main reason is that atlases in RefreshUI are generated based on sprites collected from atlasable components. And the relationship between atlas and sprite is defined when you assign atlas reference to component. Let me show you how it works. So here you have basic sprite selected and you have atlas assigned directly to atlas property. When you ask RefreshUI to build atlases, atlas generator collects all atlasable sprites and extracts all atlases and textures. After it, generator combines textures collected to texture atlases. One texture atlas for each UI atlas. Now, why this is a big deal? It allows to minimize one important problem that I had million times before. The problem is the garbage in atlases. In big projects, it is easy to lose control on what textures in Atlas are actually used and what are not. Also, if you start a new project based on the previous one and reskin existing UIs, then at some point it will be super difficult to say which textures are old and not used and which ones are new. So as I said, RefreshUI tries to minimize this issue. But everything comes at cost, and the cost for this feature is that you should put all UIs in prefabs. This way Atlas generator will be able to scan all UI prefabs and pack only these textures that are found in these prefabs. Of course, it is possible to define a set of folders for UI prefabs because no one wants the entire project to be scanned each Atlas rebuild. You could do it in the UI settings script. But what exactly should I do to clean garbage in atlases in RefreshUI? You need to do two things. First, remove old prefabs from the project or move them outside UI prefabs folders. And then rebuild atlases. Done. No garbage in the atlases anymore. Well, of course, one important note here. I assume that you don't have garbage in your UI prefabs. Let me show you how to create an atlas and sprite from scratch. First, we need to create an atlas asset. To do so, select a folder where you want to put your atlas and execute RefreshUI create asset UIAtlas. In my case, I have UI folder here, so I select this UI folder and use RefreshUI create asset UIAtlas command. Now let's create a sprite. We need to create new game object and add UISprite there. Okay, let's call it new sprite. And we need to add UISprite. For example, add UISprite here, like this. Okay, now we need to assign here atlas that we have created in this property. Just drag it here, okay. And we also need to assign a texture. I have this yellow circle here, let's assign it. And here is the important step. It is required to create a prefab from this object so that could be collected by the atlas generator. Remember, I mentioned it before. Okay, let's create a prefab in this folder. Done. Okay, the final step is to execute RefreshUI build all atlases. Let's do this. RefreshUI build all atlases. And now, if you select the texture that is used by new atlas, you will see that it has our yellow sprite inside. And actually, new sprite also now has correct sprite on it. You might have noticed that when I executed RefreshUI create asset UIAtlas, material asset and the texture have been created. The important thing is after material and texture are created, you could modify all the properties for these assets. For example, you could change shader here if you want custom shader, or you could change import settings for this texture. I think that's it for today. If you want to know more about RefreshUI, follow link in the description. See you next time.